Here was directed by Robert Zemeckis and is the reunion between him and his two stars from Forrest Gump, one of my all-time favorite movies, Tom Hanks and Robin Wright, Ginny. And obviously just based off of the pedigree that's involved in this movie, just based on the star power and the fact that it's kind of a Forrest Gump reunion in a sense. You're just missing Lieutenant Dan and Bubba and Sally Field and everybody else. But that's what this movie was marketed as. It was also based off of a graphic novel that came out not too long ago. And basically the whole concept is multiple generations of couples and families inhabit the same home over the course of a century. And the whole idea is, if you look at the trailer, the camera stays in the same exact spot throughout the entire 1 hour 45-minute runtime. And this can be a pretty interesting movie conceptually. And I don't want to sit here and say that I'm one of those people who's against this idea. Like, let's say you go to a Broadway play and you go and watch, I don't know, let's say Noises Off, for example. A lot of that takes place in one location. 12 Angry Men is another example. It takes place all in one location. And 12 Angry Men is one of my favorite movies ever. So the whole idea of this movie basically being like a whole time loop in a sense, that's a pretty unique idea. Not one that I've seen done in movies a lot, if not at all. And I feel like that may be one of Robert Zemeckis' biggest strengths as a director. He is willing to think outside the box, and he is willing to put out some of the more unique ideas out there in the open when it comes to cinema. And I think here is a pretty well-made movie for the most part. The precision in the editing is certainly there, and you can definitely tell that there's a lot of passion being put into this. It honestly feels like a movie that was meant to be put in like an art exhibition in a sense. Like, you're not necessarily going to watch the movie for the story per se. You're going to kind of admire the movie for what it is. And that's not to say that this movie doesn't have any sort of emotional substance whatsoever. There are a multitude of different stories that are weaved into this one location, but the one that the audience is investing their most time in is the one between Tom Hanks and Robin Wright as Ricky and Margaret. And man, those two, their chemistry just has not changed over the past 30 years. It is still as strong as ever. And I don't want to dig too deep into spoilers or anything, but it's a very different dynamic that these two have throughout the entirety of this movie. The whole arc that their relationship takes, it isn't necessarily one I was expecting, but there were a few points where I certainly found myself relating to, especially Tom Hanks' struggles. And listen, Tom Hanks is one of the greatest actors who ever lived. I'm fully convinced of that. This man, I'm convinced, can do no wrong, and he is the perfect everyman actor. Seriously, one of the most famous actors alive. I'm sure, unless you're living under a rock, you know who Tom Hanks is. And once again, he's really, really great in this movie. Robin Wright as well. I haven't really seen her do a big movie like this for a long time. It's great to see Buttercup back in the limelight. I also got to give a special shout out to Vision, Paul Bettany. Great in this. Paul Bettany actually plays Tom Hanks' father in this. I'm not kidding. And his whole bitterness and his whole story is so tragic in its own right. And even though a lot of these stories for a lot of these characters don't really feel all that exciting in the grand scheme of things, it still feels like real life is happening before your eyes. Because these are real problems these people are dealing with. These are very real and very serious situations that we see them in as a fly on the wall. And this movie has a lot of glimmers of really good narrative storytelling throughout this. But it can't really do that when it's basically constrained to being a gimmick. And that's what I think is holding here back from being one of the year's strongest. It definitely feels a lot more like it's a parlor trick than a narrative story. Remember how I said Robert Zemeckis' greatest strength as a director was trying unique outside-the-box ideas? That can also be his greatest weakness in a sense, because there's times where he will try to pioneer a certain filmmaking technique, and for a while it's going to succeed. But then when he keeps trying to hammer the idea in over and over again, it'll fizzle out. The best example of this is the motion capture animation phase that he was going through. Polar Express, Beowulf, A Christmas Carol. I can't think of another film that he's put out since 2009 with this technique, because I really do feel like the novelty wore off on a lot of people. And if Robert Zemeckis decides to make more movies like this where the camera is just in one spot, yeah, it's going to get really old really fast for a lot of people. So now I'm hoping for Robert Zemeckis' next movie that he does, he kind of goes back to his old ways and he gives us a really great movie like Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, dare I say. This is not to say that Here is a bad movie at all. I definitely enjoyed it, but I feel like a lot of the time jumps felt super abrupt, and there was a point where it felt like I was more so watching vignettes as opposed to one flowing narrative. And you know what? In a lot of cases, that works for me, and vignettes are all I really need. But if you're gonna show me a bunch of vignettes over the course of a century, dare I say, give equal attention to every single story, because this movie really was hunkering down on the Tom Hanks, Robin Wright reunion. And they had gold 30 years ago with Forrest Gump. So I don't blame the studio for marketing it as a Forrest Gump reunion of sorts. But I feel like if you're going to show a whole century's worth of storytelling in this one spot, give me more in the supporting stories. Give me more in the aftermath of Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. We see only a little bit of that. Give me a lot more when these Native Americans are here on this soil living their life. Give me a lot more during the Benjamin Franklin era when this was just a colonial battlefield. And again, I hate to say this, it's not that the Tom Hanks, Robin Wright, Paul Bettany story arc was uninteresting, but it kind of felt unfair to the other stories that were surrounding it. Because there were a lot of fun stories that were weaved in throughout this movie, but it really hunkered down on the Forrest Gump reunion. That's all I'm saying. And yeah, I'll address it. The CGI in this movie really wasn't all that great. It's sad to say that too, because Forrest Gump, when that CG came out, Forrest Gump talking to John F. Kennedy in the White House on a college football visit, that was revolutionary, man. And trust me, that is the only time I will accept Hollywood reviving these faces from the dead. Don't revive dead actors with AI. Just don't do it. But you fast forward from Forrest Gump 30 years on, and the CG in here just really isn't up to snuff. Like, there's a hummingbird that flies in every now and then, and it looks so incredibly fake. And I feel like the de-aging technology that you've seen in movies like Captain Marvel, like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I think it is handled a lot better here. And you can sense that Tom Hanks and Robin Wright are the ages they're supposed to be. But come on, if you've been following these people throughout their whole careers, you know how old they are by this point. So it can be a bit distracting, especially if you are a longtime fan of Tom Hanks like me. And yes, even though the de-aging technology is a little bit better than I'm used to, let me put it this way. I criticized Avatar: The Way of Water for casting Sigourney Weaver as a teenager, so I would feel like a massive hypocrite if I gave Here a pass, when they were essentially doing the same thing. And I understand it's different. We are following Tom Hanks and Robin Wright throughout their entire lives together in this movie. But in those scenes where they're like 18, 19 years old, it can be pretty distracting. But all in all, I certainly don't think Here is a terrible movie. I actually think it's a good movie, and I wouldn't mind watching it again. I watched it with Lindsay tonight. She actually liked it a lot better than she expected going in. She looked at the trailer and she thought it looked boring. Now, this movie may be a lot of things. A lot of people might label it a gimmick, a parlor trick, and they're absolutely right in that sense. But boring is not an adjective I would use to describe this movie. I think if you're someone like me who idolizes Forrest Gump and hails it as one of the greatest movies of all time, if you're a fan of Tom Hanks, if you're a fan of Robin Wright, if you like Robert Zemeckis' filmmaking style, I think you're going to find a lot to enjoy with Here. I'm going to give Here a B. If it gives a lot more attention to the other stories surrounding the Hanks-Wright reunion, I think Here is an instant classic. But they don't do that at all, so I can't really say that Here is as great of a movie as I wanted it to be. But let me know what you thought of this film down in the comments section below. What is your favorite Robert Zemeckis movie? What's your favorite Tom Hanks performance that you've ever seen? No shortage of topics we can discuss on this channel, guys. Hit that subscribe button if you're new. Tap on that thumbs up as well. And stay tuned for more videos very soon throughout a jam-packed month of November. A month of sequels, it looks like. Gladiator 2, Moana 2, Wicked is also coming out. And keep your eyes out for reviews on all the predecessor movies in the build-up to all three of those hits. But it should be a lot of fun over here, guys. And I can't wait to wrap up 2024 with you guys in the best way possible. Thank you again for your continued support of the channel. Y'all are the best. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.